Folks, this is truly an unleashed episode. You're going to want to stay till the end because I'm probably going to get canceled. In the 80s, we had Jan Stevenson. And in the 2024 Women's US Open, we probably, as the first alternate, are going to have Man Stevenson. Yes, that's correct. A transgender golfer is probably going to be in the Women's US Open next week. It gets a little confusing because there's the actress Leslie Mann. She's not a man. But we also have the transgender golfer Haley Davidson, who's not a biological female. Is there actually going to be a merger? Because these guys are still giving the same anti-live talking points, except for now, Brandel Chamblee, who's at the same time saying that all these negative things about live, still shitting on the players. He's now saying, hey, they need to take the money.
Let's say this deal goes through, which is highly problematic. It's going to have to pass. 3 of the 5 players on the player policy board are going to have to agree with this. I don't see that happening.
Well, I hope the live deal goes through now. It's obvious the best thing for the PGA Tour.
So he's doing his own flip-flop as well.
I have never shown any respect for Brandel Chamblee because I believe the guy's a total fraud. And I've just been around him too much. And I see how he operates. And I do text Greg every once in a while. And I do text my old producers at Golf Channel. And I text people that I've become comfortable with that tell me a lot that's going on that people just don't know. And, I'd hate to find a dead horse in my bed sometime for exposing it, but it ain't really good stuff out there. And I have a feeling that's why the PIF and PGA Tour wanted to get together, because of the expose that they were going to put out on the PGA Tour. And now all of a sudden the PGA Tour was going to get ruined because of some of maybe the shenanigans that they've been pulling.
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mark No Lye Lye.
Well, thanks. I actually prefer Mark Unplayable Lye, which was given to me by an amateur golfer named George Haynes back in the day when I was playing in college. And that one was picked up by Chris Berman, when he did his stuff. So, No Lie's okay. I like that.
It's a whole new era of golf media, and you're one of the few guys out there who has this extensive international experience. You were the 1977 Australian Order of Merit winner.
I won the Order of Merit. That was worth about $40,000 for winning the whole thing, which was worth about $50,000 in U.S. money, and they took $20,000 out in taxes. So this is back in the late 70s.
You've seen golf be international at one point. You spent 18 years on the PGA Tour, so you've got tons of knowledge on the PGA Tour side. And then you've got all this time on the Golf Channel and SiriusXM. It's insane, your background. How are you not one of the leading voices out there right now?
Well, because the truth hurts. And, I was pretty outspoken, and I always act like I don't have any bosses when I speak. And sometimes it ruffles the feathers of the higher ups. I know it personally. It happens. And, if they tell me to go a certain direction and I say, I don't want to do that, they get upset about that. And so the latest thing was the radio. And, the SiriusXM deal, that was the best gig I ever had. That was the best. Because, TV kind of like you're kind of crammed into a small package. Okay. You have to get stuff done in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. On radio, you can just kind of like air it out and hopefully get your point across better. But the latest one was I made a joke about the WNBA. I said, nobody watches the WNBA. In fact, you'd have to put a gun to my head to make me watch it. 3 hours later, I was done. And the thing that was funny about that is the fact that there was a female producer back there that during the break said, Mark, that's the funniest line we've had all year. And so literally 3 hours later, I was off the job. And I said, you know something, if I can't say anything that innocuous anymore, I don't want to work for these guys. I don't want to work for Golf Channel. Look, I had 18 years at Golf Channel. I ruffled some feathers, both with players and some of my higher ups and people like Brandel. It bothers me to say that I was on the Golf Channel for 18 years from the very starting day till 18 years later. And now when I look at it, I say, wow, what a change. And it's basically the left has taken over in all categories. You can't say this, you can't say that. You have to stroke this guy. You have to make sure that everything is cool with this. Your pronouns have to be right. I said, look, guys, you came to me to want me to work for you at SiriusXM. I said, I want it out of the game. They said, no, we want you to tell it exactly how it is, unless it hurts them. Then they want to dummy you up.
This is essentially cancel culture, and it's what the Golf Channel tried to do to the Live Golf League. Just drum up all these false narratives, try to silence their voices. But one voice that wasn't silenced recently is Anthony Kim, who's been going off on that bogus fraud, Brandel Chamblee, literally calling him a pussycat, because Brandel Chamblee is now flipping on his previous stance of don't take what Brandel Chamblee referred to as the Saudi blood money. Now he's all for it. Now he's saying the PGA Tour has to take this money. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you can see that he's in a losing battle, I guess. And look, God bless Anthony Kim. I didn't used to like Anthony. I thought he was brash. He was a drunk. He would go to ladies' bars and all this stuff before the tournament. I heard all this, carousing he was doing. It was not good. He lost it. And now he got it back. I think, the time off did him some good. He's a father, and he seems to be a good guy. I've totally flipped on Anthony Kim. I am a fan now. I've been watching his tweets, and yeah, it's about time that somebody, the thing is, you don't see enough tweets about Brandel because he basically cancels you. If you say something, I remember first getting on Twitter or X, and I said, this guy's, he said this wrong, he said this wrong, and he said this wrong. Well, I got a phone call from freaking Brandel that night. What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? You don't know what the hell you're talking. I said, dude, I worked along you for so long. It's like, I know your deal. So, yeah, he ought to be flipping pancakes at Waffle House. I'm telling you, that's how the guy flips. I've seen him in weeks where on Tuesday he's high on something, and then by Friday he goes the exact other way. He's a complete flip. Yeah, it's a rigged game by the PGA Tour, and I'm afraid I just know too much. Look, I was around when Larry Rinker came after him, and not a big name guy, but he was a winner on tour, and he saw some stuff that wasn't adding up. And then Danny Edwards came in there, who was a bright guy. He was actually a semi-professional race car driver, along with Roger Penske. You know the great Roger Penske, but Danny Edwards is kind of Penske's young protege type. And Danny Edwards, a 4-time winner or 5-time winner on the PGA Tour, he came up to the tour with an attorney and said, hey, we just want to look at things. No, that didn't happen. And then Greg Norman came to the door, and said, I would like to see the book. You've always said in our meetings that we can look at the books. Yeah, that's the way they started their meeting. Hey, if anyone wants to come in and look at our procedures and look at this, you just come on in. Well, guess what? 3 or 4 guys tried to do that, and they just stonewall them every time. And that's exactly their MO. The MO of the PGA Tour is tell them nothing, give them nothing. You produce the narrative, which is the PGA Tour, and then hopefully the sheep will follow in line. Now, everybody's in bed with the tour. That's the thing. The press is in bed with the tour. I don't get why, hey, they're playing for blood money, which is what Brandel says and which is what Eamon Lynch says and what every writer that rides along the coattails of Jay Monahan so they completely get better access. If they don't toe the company line, guess what? They're going to get shunned. They're not going to get access. They're going to get credentials declined.
James Hahn has been very outspoken on Twitter about, a lot of things.
You have to try to make improvements for the guys you're afraid of losing. And quite frankly, nobody's afraid of losing James Hahn.
As soon as James Hahn got a little spicy with his takes, you would have like the CBS podcast literally calling him stupid.
I think James Hahn's generally an idiot.
So you can just see how the media automatically, once they get their little dog whistle, start attacking you.
Far from stupid. James Hahn is a wonderful person, a good family guy, but they're looking for fake scapegoats. This is a political thing. You know, I'm looking at it in politics every day.
What is it like working at the Golf Channel? Is there like, because you obviously 18 years there, you know the place in and out. Is there a meeting room where you guys all meet up and this person has to say this narrative, this person has to say this narrative? Because Brandel Chamblee has been looking off the same yellow notepad in multiple, Golf Channel episodes, and you can just see him basically reading the same talking points. Do the Golf Channel guys have these talking points? Who develops them? How does this all play out for us at home?
Look, I started in 1995. That's when we hit the air. And I lasted for 18 years, and I loved my job, but it was getting old. They never indoctrinated us with things to say or do. They kind of like said, hey, you can't really get on Tiger, or hey, man, you really can't get on Phil because we need access to these guys. So we kind of handled them a little bit with kid gloves. And let me tell you something. If you said 10 great things about Tiger and one thing that was kind of like so-so, you got killed. In those days, it was much different. Now I believe they're getting talking points because as I started seeing in my radio career, which was 7 years, I started out balls to the wall, saying what I felt, the things I could never say on TV. That was my show called Time to Let It Fly, the things I could never say on TV. That's what they hired me for. Man, after about 4 years, they said, Mark, you really can't do that. You remember when the match was Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods? Remember when the match was going to happen? Well, I do music along with my shows. And this seems very innocuous, but I said, I want to start the show with Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, right? I got a call 10 minutes from the show. And they said, Mark, we're recommending that you don't do that song. And I said, what? Really? It's kind of like tongue in cheek. And, it's about love all of a sudden. What the heck? No, we don't want you to do that song. And I said, wow, that's pretty strong right there. And then from then on, I started seeing more and more things where they were trying to put us in a box. And, oh, you can't say this and you can't say that. And you can't say this because, the tour doesn't like this. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Greg Norman did the Ryder Cup for us one year. It was at Whistling Straits. And this was my last year at SiriusXM. They had hired Greg Norman to do the Ryder Cup, okay, from the SiriusXM side. And Greg does a great job. I don't know if you've ever listened to him or whatever. But the Ryder Cup was in September, right? Late September or something, in Whistling Straits. And I found out later, they knew that Greg Norman was going to do this LIV thing. They all knew it. The tour basically said, hey, we would like it if you wouldn't have Greg Norman on, but we did anyway. And so then the SiriusXM started going the other way. We'd already hired Greg. We'd done the deal. It was a fantastic Ryder Cup. I mean, we just boot stomped those guys. And then all of a sudden, on January 1st, when the LIV came out, it was like we couldn't talk about LIV. It was like the players that left for the LIV, we couldn't talk about them.
1999, Payne Stewart, iconic, historic, puts, I wouldn't say Pinehurst on the map, but then you had Michael Campbell and Martin Keimer. I wouldn't say obscure, but they would love to see like a Ricky Fowler or, Dustin Johnson, a bigger name.
Then I started seeing one by one, everybody starting trashing Greg and trashing Phil and trashing anyone that left and saying all these untrue things about him. And I said, this just doesn't seem right. So literally from that time on, I said, I'm done in 6 months at this job. There is just no way. Turns out after making that comment about the WNBA, I got terminated in February. So I still had 4 months left on my contract, but I was glad to get the hell out of there. In fact, I had stopped doing my show 6 months before that because I said, hey guys, I'm canceling my own show called Time to Let It Fly. You know why? Because I can't let it fly anymore. They're telling me what I can and can't say. For a guy that missed Q school 7 times, I mean, Brandel's lost his card more than he's kept his card on the PGA Tour. Have you ever checked that? How can he be the voice of the tour or the voice of Golf Channel? That's a joke. You know, we're sitting up there one time, and Frank Nobla and I were good friends. Brandel came a little bit late to the show. Frank and I had been working together with Rich Lerner and, you know, a lot of good guys, Craig Cann, Brian Hammonds. And Brandel comes in there one day, and there's 3 of us on the dais, and I think Craig Cann is moderating. And we're going to the pregame, you know, before the show. We're saying, okay, we got to cover this subject. I got 3 minutes on this subject. And Brandel, or who wants to go first? Brandel says, I'll go first. Okay, 60 out of you, Brandel, 60 out of you, Frank, and 60 out of you, Mark. Okay, 3 minutes, 60 seconds apiece. 2 minutes and 50 seconds later, Brandel gets done. Okay, now this is what I said earlier about putting us into a box. We have to hit these marks for breaks and things like that. The ball goes to Frank, and you know, Craig Cann says, quickly, Frank, what do you say about this? And Frank says, well, if I had time, I would have said this. You know, but and then the thing never got to me. But we call that an air hog, a guy that doesn't know his place and doesn't care about his place, just thinks that he's more important than everybody else. He used to put phone books on his seat in the studio, New York City phone books that were like 3 inches thick, so he could be up to the level with everybody else. I guess he's got a thing about height or whatever. The chair would only go up so high. I mean, I've seen so much stuff out of this dirt bag. It's incredible. And when I turn on Golf Channel today, I'm absolutely ashamed. I'm ashamed that they have gone this direction, because in the 18 years, or at least 15 years of the 18 that I worked there, it was a fantastic place to work for. It makes me sad to see what they've turned into right now.
I remember back in the day, you'd watch Shell's Wonderful World of Golf occasionally would be on there. You see some Jack Nicklaus old matches. Maybe you buy Mark O'Meara's Perfect Grip for $49.99 because it does make sense that you need to have a perfect grip to have a perfect swing. So it was all pleasant memories. And then in the last bunch of years, it's almost like you're watching a political channel and you're getting angry at the show. And it's part of the reason a lot of my episodes, I actually just provide receipts to counter the points they're making because it's such nonsense.
Well, you're right. It is nonsense. And unless you drink the PGA Tour Kool-Aid, you can decipher what's nonsense and what's right. I just became more of an LIV fan just because I say, okay, so they're the underdogs. They're going to prove all these Bob Herrigs, Jaime Diaz, all these guys wrong. Eamon Lynch, the more they get out there and pontificate how a player should be and what he should do, I'm thinking, well, wow, did this guy ever hit a shot? Does this guy ever know what it's like to be a player? Hell no. It's like Brandel being on the set with David Duval and talking about Ryder Cup. Brandel said, yeah, it's like this. And so David Duval turns at him one time and says, oh, well, yeah, have you ever been in the team room? Well, no. He says, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? And Brandel says, no. He says, well, I can write about the Boston Tea Party even though I wasn't there. I mean, that was his deal. So, I look at David Duval. He's the guy. He was there with the greatest comeback ever, at the country club at Brookline. And Brandel's trying to tell him what's going on in Ryder Cup. I'm thinking, that's Brandel Chamblee right there. Total baloney. So when I turn on the Golf Channel and Brandel's on there, I just flip it right off.
The only thing that I think Brandel Chamblee is an authority on is maybe hair product. How much time does that guy spend getting his coif in order?
I don't know. Like I said, I haven't been in there for at least 8 years, and I'm sure they're afraid to make him look bad. But he does enough of that himself without looking like a prima donna. He does so with his words. And this is not a Brandel bashing thing. This is just, I don't see how some guy like this, who is so little in the game, can be talked about so much when it's so much smoke. You know, they asked me one time to do a comparison. There was a guy, Larry Nelson. Larry Nelson, great guy, great player. Played.
Three-time major winner.
Yeah. Oh,
Started in his early 20s after serving in the military.
Yeah. Had the most unorthodox backswing, you know, kind of crossed the line real big. Wasn't a big guy, but had his own type of swing, you know? And so this one producer who will be nameless, see, that's the thing. Brandel fools all these producers. They're 25 to 30 years old. They think that he hung the moon, and they don't know he doesn't know shit. So they asked me to analyze, to compare Hogan's swing to Larry Nelson's swing one time. And I said, guys, you can cancel me out of that because there ain't nothing the same in those two swings. And they said, oh, okay. So then that night on the show, Brandel did it. And he was drawing lines and doing all this stuff and making his case. And I'm thinking that was the biggest bunch of crap I've ever seen. But that's what kind of like what we're dealing with. He's looking for the next thing, the next shock rock, or the next, you know, because this is all he's going to be ever remembered for. Brandel Chamblee is a joke. Nothing worse than a dumb guy that thinks he's smart. And that's basically what Brandel is. And that's why he uses the big words. I mean, you have to know your audience. You're a pretty astute guy. I've got a college degree, all right? And I don't understand what Brandel's saying sometimes. So I'm saying, dude, what was that all about? He says, you know, listen and learn. And I said, well, do you think anybody understood that out there? No, they didn't understand. You know, these are, you know, guys like you and me. They don't use words like that. He says, you stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. I said, fine, that's great. Good for you. So I don't know what he feels small, I guess, to a point where he feels like he has to use big words.
I like that. Small men use big words. Here's another thing about Brandel Chamblee that I think everyone's picked up on this at this point. You had Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive trying to catch Harrison Ford for over 2 hours. And now we've got multiple instances of Brandel Chamblee trying to catch Patrick Reed in a cheating incident. It's insane at this point. The last one was when the ball went in the wrong tree at Dubai. So Brandel Chamblee is actually doing like UFO flight charts.
Again, we're going to slow this down and spot shadow it for you. So there's the golf ball. You can clearly see it as it's descending down. Right? We're just going to follow the path of this golf ball, and as it gets closer, we're going to slow it down even more for you. And
sounds like the Trump derangement syndrome. They've got the Patrick Reed derangement syndrome. They'll find a crime sooner or later. And yeah, I guess, you know, Patrick Reed has been known, but so was VJ, and so was there was another guy from South Africa, and there have been guys, but you know, I mean, Tiger ain't the most honest guy in the world either, to be honest with you. They've had to nail him on a couple of things. But look, the Patrick Reed's just another perfect scapegoat for the PGA Tour.
In terms of the Golf Channel, is there a hierarchy there? Because it does seem when Paul McGinley's speaking about something that that Chamblee wants him to address, he's stammering and sweating the whole time. Very nervous looking.
I like Paul McGinley. I think he's forced into saying certain things that he's not comfortable with. And he has said some things that I know Paul a little bit. I have a lot of respect for him. You know, he was a guy that basically accomplished a lot with not much talent. And I like a guy like that. And the Ryder Cupper and all of this stuff. But I have a feeling that he's been dictated a certain way to go by some higher ups. And like I said, I don't know that for sure. But if a guy's not emphatic about the way he's talking, then the chances are is that he's being watched from somebody behind. I don't like that. I don't like having to weigh my words every time I make a statement. Oh man, this is going to get me in trouble. You know, so it's better to be unfiltered than it is filtered. And so probably McGinley is feeling a little bit filtered.
What's going on with Eamon Lynch? He seems to be a very vile person. You read his little articles. It's the same article over and over again. He always throws in bonesaw. He's referring to arsonists trying to start a fire and then give advice how to put out the fire. He uses that analogy multiple times. To me, it feels like the Golf Channel has been an arsonist the whole time. And now, not only are they not trying to put out the fire, they're still trying to add fuel, even though in their own best interest, they need the PIF money at this point, because the Golf Channel is basically a broadcast partner of the PGA Tour.
That's pretty much what it seems. There's no objective opinion out there. It's come a long way since the days where I was out there working with Keith Hirschland, who's actually producing all the LIV events right now. He's the best producer that ever walked. And so a lot has changed since the days that I were there. And that's what happened when big corporations take over. I mean, we were a small little company, and then all of a sudden ABC got in there, and then NBC Universal got in there, and then they swallowed us up, and then they moved the headquarters up to Connecticut somewhere. So, big business creates more, I guess, chains. You have to accommodate whoever the big boy is. So back in my day, we had very little of that, although the company changed hands at least 5 times when I was there. But most likely it changed most after year 13 and 14. Then it seemed like every year there was another cook in the kitchen trying to do so. We'll bring in this guy from NBC. We'll bring in this guy from ABC. We'll bring in a Comcast guy. So we kind of lost our continuity. And then all of a sudden, NBC Universal takes us over. And now they've basically moved us up to Connecticut. I say us. I still say us because I was one of the original guys. But yeah, it's totally different than when we were there a long time ago. And there's very few people. I think Kay Cockerill is probably the only person that started from day one that's still there announcing for Golf Channel.
Well, you've got Damon Hack there, who to me the whole time is doing a Bill Cosby impression. It's like I'm expecting him to talk about pudding pops any second. And then in 2018, they bring in Jaime Diaz, whose claim to fame is Golf Digest, New York Times, and Sports Illustrated. To me, junk. I don't know how anyone who's worked at New York Times after the whole COVID thing still thinks that's a positive. You now look at Golf Digest. They put out some article on what if Rory and Homa were in the 90s, and now you see an image of Rory McIlroy with a do-rag on. So that's just completely jumped the shark. I have no idea. That's not the Golf Digest I grew up with, where Payne Stewart's in an outfit, half black, half white, showing you different body positions. And now we've evolved to now Max Homa is an emo kid in the 90s. I don't know what's happening. And then finally you have Sports Illustrated, which is now was recently accused of using AI to write the articles that are so bad that I'd rather blame it on AI if I was Baloney Bob Harrig.
I got into a real pissing contest with Bob Harrig. And, he was criticizing me for saying what I said about the basketball. You'd have to put a gun to my head to make me watch the WNBA. He says, you're a sexist and all that stuff. And I said, oh, yeah, that's coming from a guy who does a swimsuit issue at Sports Illustrated every year. I said, you got a lot of room to talk. Talk about exploiting women. I said, it's, get off your high horse here. The PGA Tour is not an open book. There's a closed room in there somewhere, a different set of books going on. And I'm sure that the players and all of these Jordan Spieths and Kevin Streelmans and all these guys, they have no idea exist. That's just my thoughts. And but they're acting like they do have a lot to hide, the PGA Tour.
Well, it's funny that you have Bob Harrig, Baloney Bob Harrig, recently putting out some information that the majors have turned their back on LIV, and then within 20 hours he has to put in the retraction on his own tweet that, hey, all these guys are now in now. So these guys who pretend they're insiders and have those inside information don't have the access that you have.
No, they don't. And I don't flaunt it. I don't get on, hey, I just heard this, I just heard this. No, I don't do that. I kind of when I do, podcasts or interviews or things, I use it sparingly, but I know back, when somebody gives me a bullshit line, I'll say, "Nah, time out. That ain't right."
There's a double standard with you and SiriusXM. You say rightfully that you wouldn't want to watch WNBA. No one wants to watch WNBA. That's why the NBA has to pay money to keep the league going. Whereas Aaron Oberholzer says he's literally wants to physically harm a man, and he's not been fired. So I don't know what's going on. You're like, am I right? Like, is that a little bit weird?
Yeah, it does sound a little bit weird, but it depends on the viewpoint you have. If it's okay with the left, then that's fine. If you're against Saudi Arabia, no matter what you say is acceptable. If you think that you ought to take a gun to Donald Trump, that's okay. But if Trump says I need to take a gun to Joe Biden, then that's not okay. That's just the way it is right now. I mean, they're killing Trump so bad over bullshit. It's hurting our whole system of government. It's hurting everything that's what's going on. And I see a parallel between what's happening in politics and what's happening on the PGA Tour /LIV. The same exact thing.
And this is political and involves women in sports, debatably so. What do you think of the transgender golfer Haney, who is the first alternate in the Women's U.S. Open?
I hope it gets in, and it's the worst week of its life. This is not fair. It never has been fair. Renee Richards was the first trans to ever play tennis or whatever. That wasn't fair. Should be born a man, playing men's sports, born a woman, playing women's sports. My daughter's in high school right now. She's playing some great golf. She's heard about a trans playing on the East Coast. I think these little girls that were in the shot put deal that it was in some high school, they had to compete against a trans, and they basically said they went through a fake motion with the shot put and walked out of the circle. I think that they all ought to do that and just let the trans take over and not have the sport as it's represented, because this Riley Gaines, she's onto something. I mean, who would have thought that we would have to defend women playing women's sports? Who would think that we're at a point in this Me Too world or crazy world that it would be okay to be Bruce Jenner and compete in the women's decathlon, or Caitlyn Jenner? I mean, even Caitlyn Jenner says, no, it's not right. So I don't understand. The ladies basketball coach says, yeah, I welcome trans players in basketball. I just think it's total baloney. And so this thing that's going to play in the Women's National Open as a transgender, I hope it's the worst week of that soul's life. I really do. And we need to cut that thing before it bleeds.
I don't want to touch that last part. I'm going to leave that there. Well, it's interesting because if you're a man and you say something to a woman, a lot of them will say you are mansplaining, and that's a bad thing. But if you are a man and you identify as a woman and go qualify for the U.S. Open, for some people that's for the Women's U.S. Open. For some people, that's something that's admirable nowadays.
It is.
I don't know.
Admirable if you're a man, born a man, and compete in a woman's sport. I don't think that's admirable at all. I mean, I don't know where. Are you in San Francisco right now?
No. I'm just saying, obviously it's just a very strange time we live in, because if I say something to a woman, she'll say, hey, you're mansplaining it to me. But if I jump over genders, I say I'm a woman now for those same people, that I can be man golfing or, trans golfing. And then I'm a hero.
Yeah. I don't agree with the logic. Their logic.
Now let's get to a little bit of a lighter topic. Happy Gilmore. You starred in it.
I'm Happy Gilmore. What's up? Hey, Happy Mark Lye. Welcome to the tour.
They're making a sequel. Have they reached out to you? And if they do reach out to you and ask you to get in this kind of Marvel superhero form or shape on the Tiger Woods special diet and training regimen, would you do it?
Absolutely. That was probably one of the funnest days of my life when I got to do that movie. I was a script consultant, and A lot of people didn't think that movie was going to do very well. In fact, a friend of mine that was a Blues Brothers guy, his name was Donald Duck Dunn. We went to the premiere together, and we walked out of that movie, and I said, "So what'd you think, Duck?" He says, "Man, that movie sucked." Talking about Happy Gilmore. And I said, okay, well, 26 years later, I'm still getting paid, believe it or not. And no, they haven't reached out to me. They haven't reached out to me. I'm actually kind of shocked because we had a really good time on set, and they filmed it up at Vancouver, British Columbia last time. So yeah, I'm still got my phone on. I still have the sound on, so I'm waiting for the call. I'm curious to see how the new Happy Gilmore comes out. I mean, I see Christopher McDonald, who was a shooter. He was a lot of fun. Adam Sandler was a beauty. He doesn't look like he's changed a bit. So, they can still do it. They probably think I'm like, 50 pounds overweight. Maybe I ought to, get on Twitter and show my excellent physique again. Maybe they'll hire me.
Well, I mean, they should have you back in. They need to get everyone who was in the original one back in there. That makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me too. But hey, whatever they want to do, I'll fly on my dime. How's that?
You send your daughter's swing to Hank Haney every 3 months. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, Hank and I are. Look, I respect Hank a lot. I'm not saying he's the best teacher in the world, but boy, he knows his stuff, and he's emphatic and enthusiastic about the game. And he and I keep in touch. He got fired from SiriusXM for saying, I think Lee Six is going to win. It's one of those Lee sisters, I don't care about women's golf. 3 days later, he was fired for saying that thing because Michelle Wee got on there and tweeted out that she was offended. So anyway, I got fired for saying something about the WNBA. And so we've stayed in touch. And I just sent my daughter's swing to Hank, and he basically he says, "Mark, that's not a good swing. That's a great swing. Keep doing with her what you've been doing." So 3 months later, I sent him another video of her, and he gets on and he says, "What the hell have you been doing? You effed up her swing big time. Come on, man. What are you doing?" So he said, "I need to get her on the phone right now. We need to work on this stuff." I said, "Gosh, I'm sorry, Hank. I hadn't seen her for 2 weeks." So anyway, he's got her swinging really well. We have another guy that I take her to on short game, and she's into her own thing. She just likes taking advice. She doesn't get into exact positions, but she likes to get the feel of the game. She's an artist. She dances, she sings, she's smart, and she's got a great swing. And Hank's flattered that I think enough of him to send him pictures of my daughter, and he's still really into it. He's up in Chicago teaching somewhere, but he's a savant on the game of golf. He really is. And I trust everything that guy says, and I like him as a person.
Is there anything you do to maintain that melodious voice?
Me? You're talking to me?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I have it. I guess I have decent pipes. I can't sing a lick. Really can't. But my wife's side of the family can sing. But no, I don't do any exercise or anything like that.
You should be back on radio.
Well, I don't really want a job. I've worked long enough, and I could see being on Outkick or something like that, or Rumble, but not any of the big ones anymore. I'm too opinionated to get by with, the politically correct environment that we're in right now.
Bad Golf Channel happens when you don't have a voice like Mark Lye in the game. Want to get you back on YouTube, want to get you on Rumble. Where can folks reach you when they want to get in contact with you?
Let It Fly on X. At Let It Fly. FLYE.
Folks, this was a banger of an episode. Reach out to Mark. His Twitter is popping off. Now X, of course. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Appreciate it. Love the work you're doing. Thanks for fighting the fight.